As Great Britain industrializes more and more, the effect of industrialism certainly sends shockwaves throughout the West. As I said before, industrialism isn't entirely unique to Great Britain, but its rapid ability to industrialize and to seek out new markets, both to extract raw materials as well as to sell those newly crafted goods that were manufactured in our factories. The rise of private investment really causes industrialism to be picked up in all parts of the Western world. This includes France, the Germanic states, as Germany was not a whole country at the time, Canada, and the United States, of course. In the United States, really beginning in the 1820s, 1830s, the United States, especially in the North, begins to rapidly industrialize into kind of a proto industrialist society, certainly centered around trade and capitalism. But you had mostly still at that point just simply textile mills, textile manufacturing, and small factories that manufactured everything from different types of lumber to performing metallurgy on metals. But close to the end of the Civil War, and especially after the Civil War, the United States really transforms under the guidance of industrialism. And it becomes a highly advanced industrial society. In fact, it eclipses, in many ways, Great Britain's ability to industrialize because it is so large and has access to so many raw materials. Now, remember that the United States, really, even by 1900, was not entirely um, as whole as it is today. Uh, we had all of these lands out west, but they were not all states. They were just territories, very much still in flux at that point as to what their futures might be. They would most likely be states, and they all became states. But what kind of states they would be and who would be living in them and how they wanted their cultures and societies to be structured were still being hammered out, as not all states are the same. Case in point, Utah. Utah was essentially a Mormon theocratic colony, and it's very different from, say, California and Texas. So all of the states were very much different, and they had different goals that they wanted to achieve for various reasons. But it's in the United States where industrialism really takes off in a different way, whereas Great Britain was seeking to create these gigantic factories that produced just lots of goods and lots of materials. They pull these raw materials and resources from all these colonies that they have around the world. The United States did a little bit of finessing with the industrial system, and they chose to go into a much more uh, technological route. I don't like using that term, but there's no other way to really put it. I've said before the aforementioned light bulb, Thomas Edison, the gramophone, also Thomas Edison, the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell, the airplane by the Wright brothers, various other types of industrial equipment, the perfection of the railroad, and the expansion of the railroad as a system. It's one of the things that makes the United States unique that Britain didn't have to do. Britain uses the railroad, it develops the railroad, it certainly is an advocate of the railroad, but Britain is an island. It's not terribly large. The United States, though, really required the railroad to march from east to west to transport these goods. And the railroad itself is a symbol as well as the embodiment of industrialism. Now, something that the United States does that is very innovative is its ability to master the assembly line and master precision machine type technologies. Now, what are precision machine technologies? What's a a precision machine? It's a machine that can make other machines. So think of a machine that has gears, like the one. Hang on a second. Let's go back here for a second. Think of this factory with its various machines and gears and levers. All that stuff has to be made. We have gears back here and gears over here, and I'm certain there's probably gears all over on this side too. I can see kind of a gear right here. Wheels, gears, pulleys, so on and so forth. These are machines, but in order to make these machines, you have to build them. It seems logical. You have to build something before it can exist. But precision machining is the creation of machines whose only job is to make parts that go into the creation of machines. This all sounds very meta, but let me try to explain it another way. Imagine what we see here in front of us is I honestly don't know what this is, but let's just say it's a textile mill. So this is a textile mill, and all of these machines are created to to manufacture textiles. Okay, but imagine a machine in a factory, and a factory full of machines who don't actually manufacture things like textiles or cars. Instead, they manufacture cogs and wheels and spokes and other accoutrements that are used in the creation of these machines. And it's that precision machine industrialism that makes the United States very, very unique, and why later on it's able to develop the assembly line. And it's able to do this for a couple of reasons. The United States doesn't have as much money as Great Britain. And so Great Britain is able to handcraft their factories to be what they want them to be at that time. So if you want to build a factory that weaves cloth, manufactures guns, manufactures vehicles, so on and so forth. You can build that factory to those specifications and use that factory only to accomplish that goal. And if you don't need it anymore, you can simply build another factory. Britain had a lot of money. The United States, especially before the Civil War, may have had wealth, but it didn't have nearly as much wealth as Britain and France. And so precision machining was brilliant because it enabled you to create a factory that could be used to make one day, say, rocking chairs. But if rocking chairs weren't doing it for you anymore, then you could retool the factory and start producing tires and wheels. And if that wasn't working, then you could retool the factory to make it into something else. And we see this later on, foreshadowing in World War I and World War II. The United States, Britain is able to do this by this point too, but the United States definitely at this point is an expert and have been doing it the longest, are able to take their factories that produce cars and boats, ships, and things like that, and are able to build military aircraft and military vehicles, military weapons very easily by simply removing some of the gears, some of the machines, repurposing some of the gears and some of the machines, and transforming them. Now, precision machining is very much an American thing, and interchangeable parts. Precision machining and interchangeable parts. That was the other half of the equation. So you have machines that make machine parts and machines, and you take these parts and you could interchange them. And what do you get with precision machining and interchangeable parts? You get the birth of the assembly line, and that's what we have here. And the assembly line and mass production is often sometimes referred to as Fordism. And Henry Ford, the inventor, well, not the inventor of the automobile, but the man who invented how to mass produce the automobile, as we see over here, really perfected the assembly line, taking vehicles and people and moving them down a continuous line of operation where workers with various degrees of skills and abilities who have certain jobs would put on tires, spokes, bolts, nuts, lights, roofs, so on and so forth, and all the trimmings that go into the car at the end, like padded seatings, the steering wheel, or any of the accoutrements that they might have had in those vehicles at that time. And Henry Ford is able to do this because of the assembly line, because of precision machining, and because of interchangeable parts. And Fordism becomes kind of an ideological view of industrialism. It becomes popular in Great Britain too. The British are certainly, as we would look to them for guidance and inspiration, and also for admittedly intellectual property theft. They did the same thing looking back at us, and they began to do the same thing in their factories. And what all of this meant, all this meant was you could take these facilities and turn them into whatever you wanted, and by integrating the workforce with the assembly line, you could produce things at a much quicker pace, more efficiently, and more efficiently. Faster pace meant cheaper prices, more goods to take to market, more goods that are available to buy at cheaper prices, to not only produce, but cheaper prices also to buy. So now more people are able to buy, which creates demand for more of your product, which means you have to build more of your product, which would then drive the price down in order to, you know how this system goes. I know we have business people in here. This is basic economics. And the workforce would be paid. In theory, better because of this. And so, because of mass production, we have an acceleration of industrialism and the demand for more markets, foreign and domestic. And a lot of this is rooted in the United States, but the United States, again, takes its cues, especially at this time, from Great Britain. But make no mistake about it, industrialism is, especially by way of the assembly line, is very much an American phenomenon. And Fordism is this very, very popular ideology on how to properly run and make your production methods much, much more efficient. Now, in the United States, but this is also true in Great Britain as well, but the United States, let's focus on them for a moment. Because you have this rapid industrialization, these larger and larger factories and mills, precision machining, interchangeable parts that make these factories and mills much more versatile and flexible as to what they can produce and how they can produce it, and the rate of speed by which they can produce materials and drive down the prices, you have the birth of a domestic market that was really not as present as it was before the Civil War. You found it in the North, certainly in parts, but not so much, but not overall. Cleveland, New York, Philadelphia, Detroit, Chicago, yes, you can find it there. Pittsburgh, places like that, Rochester, New York. But in Circleville, Ohio, which you're like, where the heck is Circleville, Ohio? The name pretty much says it all. Circleville, Ohio. No, you're not going to find that. In many parts of the South, you're not going to find that. There are exceptions, of course. Greensboro was one of them, but you're not going to find much of this. But as it grows and gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more prevalent, you have the rise of mass department stores and dry goods stores. Now, obviously, there were places in the past where you could buy things, but this is different. You could go into all of these stores and you could find just tons of things on the shelves, as you see over here. Everything from Vicks Vapor Rub, which was manufactured in Greensboro, different types of creams, lotions, food products, shoe polishes, maybe trinkets and gifts like harmonicas, anything that could be manufactured. Maybe you need nuts, bolts, screws, hardware stores, that type of stuff, all could be bought at a dry goods store. And the prices were very affordable compared to the way they would have been just 20 years before, 30 years before, when all the stuff had to be handmade or made in a shop that didn't quite have the versatility as these modern industrial factories that we have here. You also have the rise of a department store. Now, it sounds very lame and very boring, but what does a department store signify? Think about it for a moment. Take a moment and just meditate on it. Pause the video. So, what does a department store signify? It signifies, well, expendable income. People had money to buy things. Before, you pretty much made your own clothing or went to a tailor or a seamstress to have special things made or a cobbler to have your shoes made. And maybe this was somebody that was in your family, so maybe you could get a discount. But when it comes to a department store, and all of us, I'm certain, have been to a mall before. I know they're all closing up. I'm certain we've been to one before. Or think of the internet marketplace today, like Amazon. It's just full of stuff you can buy. It's just begging you for money. Bracelets, colognes, perfumes, hats, dresses, blouses, undergarments. Everything can be mass produced, and the department store represents this. And it becomes gigantic in the United States because all of these people who are filling up the cities like New York and Cleveland and that, they all are working in these factories. They are all working in the auxiliary businesses that are connected to these factories, like women working as telephone operators, men working in the mills, men working in marketing firms and marketing agencies. All of these people, the rise of a middle class, they want to go and get clothing that looks fashionable, and they want to get it at a good price, and they're going to go to a department store. You're not going to get your suits made by tailors anymore. That's expensive. But instead, you're going to go and get your suits, to use a term we use today, quote, off the rack at a place like a department store where you could look fashionable at a very good price. This all is an extension of and was caused by the Industrial Revolution.